This short podcast is about the 8 Rajputs and how its pure non-Punjabi Hindu Rajput 100% class composition was changed after the First World War. This is from my book Political Consequences of the First World War on the British Indian Army's class composition and myths about class composition. This is available on the Amazon books. Political Consequences of the First World War in the British Indian Army's class composition and myths about class composition. This short book deals with the political consequences of soldiers from various ethnicities on the recruitment policy of the British in India. This scribe is of the view, and this assertion is proved in this book, that political loyalty was the ultimate factor in British recruitment policy in India starting from 1858, particularly after the First World War. We will start by examining each infantry unit of the British Army in 1914 and post-World War. Firstly, there are nonsense myths that have persisted and are repeated. Major General Fazl Mukim of Pakistan Army fallaciously claimed that there were no all-Muslim units in British Indian Army. This was totally false. There were many all-Muslim units between 1890 and 1914 and some till 1947. What Fazl Mukim was trying to imply was that Muslims were regarded as most dangerous and untrustworthy by the British. Interestingly, the opposite is true. For example, Sikhs dominated the fighting arms like infantry as late as the end of First World War, but were reduced after 1918 as they exhibited politically defined anti-British behavior in some units in the First World War. On the other hand, Punjabi Muslims were most loyal in the First World War, and thus Punjabi Muslims' quota in infantry was increased and exceeded Sikh quota in infantry only after the First World War ended. This was not due to any fighting qualities but pure political loyalty. Such was the British mistrust of Sikhs that all Sikh units were mixed with Punjabi Muslim companies. Two Pakistani origin authors are in lead in holding Guinness Book record of making false claims. These are Shuja Nawaz and Shaukat Raza. An Indian self-styled expert, Kaushik Roy, deserves Guinness Book record in churning baseless nonsense. Like in a book on the First World War, he falsely claimed that there were Pathans in British Indian artillery at Gallipoli, a case of absolute lies. Interestingly, Kaushik Roy, for example, in total violation of all historical truth, falsely proclaims in one of his books, The Indian Army of the Two World Wars, edited by Kaushik Roy. He claims, quote, most of the martial races who provided personnel for the Indian Army were Punjabi Muslims, Pathans and Hindustani Muslims, unquote. Page 17, The Indian Army of the Two World Wars, edited by Kaushik Roy. A totally false claim. As you can see, British Indian Army Infantry class composition of 1914. As you can see very clearly, I have with great effort compiled this table, absolutely original table. There were 220 Sikh companies. They were in lead in infantry in the army, in the British Indian Army. Followed by Sikhs, there were 160 Gorkha companies. And third were the Punjabi Muslims with 125 companies, almost half the number of Sikhs. Fourth were Pathan companies. Fourth were Hindu Rajput, Hindu non-Punjabi Rajput companies. As you can see, 114 companies. Fifth were Pathan companies, 74 companies. Sixth were Hindu Jat, again non-Punjabi Hindu Jat companies, as you can see 60 companies, and later on others. Now this table clearly proves that Kaushik Roy's claim on page 17 of his book Indian Army of the Two World Wars is totally false. Kaushik Roy crossed all limits in intellectual rape of facts regarding class composition when in a book which he edited he falsely claimed as below. This is Indian Army in the Two World Wars, edited by Kaushik Roy, ISBN as you can see 13857827, much acclaimed book. Now Indian Army in the Two World Wars, edited by Kaushik Roy. Now see the false claim by Kaushik Roy. Most of the martial races who produced personnel for the Indian Army, says Kaushik Roy, were Punjabi Muslims, Pathans and Hindustani Muslims. Now the actual position of the Indian Corps in France in the First World War in 1914 was Muslim companies 34, as you can see, and non-Muslim companies 134. So absolute nonsense that the Muslims were in the majority in the First World War, as he claims. In Mesopotamia and Iraq, again, Muslims had 22 companies or squadrons, whereas non-Muslims had, as you can see, 62 companies. So this deals with the false claims of Kaushik Roy. Now we will deal with the 8 Rajputs, how these battalions, all non-Punjabi Hindu Rajput composition in the First World War was tempered, and this unit was diluted by mixing with the Punjabi Muslims after the First World War. These are the badges of the units, as you can see, 8 Rajputs. Another badge, as you can see, this unit was raised in 1814 as the 1st Battalion, 30th Regiment of the Bengal Native Infantry. In 1824 it became 59th Regiment of Bengal Native Infantry. In 1861 it became 8th Regiment of Bengal Native Infantry. In 1897 it became 8th Rajput Regiment of Bengal Infantry. In 1901 it became 8th Rajput Infantry. In 1903 it became 8th Rajputs. It fought in the First Sikh War at the Battle of Sobraon, and it also fought in the Second Afghan War and was granted the Battle Honour Afghanistan. Now how this battalion's class composition was tempered, as you can see, we will go back now to my book, and as you can see clearly, 8th Rajput, political consequences of the First World War and the British and Indian Army's class composition. 8 Rajputs in 1914 was an all Hindustani Hindu Rajput unit, non-Punjabi Hindu Rajput unit in 1914. As you can see from the army list also, this unit performed well in the First World War, but after the First World War, the British had developed a phobia against the Hindus as well as the Sikhs because of the 1919 non-cooperation movement, and they had decided to reduce the number of the Hindus and Sikhs in the infantry, particularly the non-Punjabi Hindus as well as the Sikhs who were Punjabi speaking. Both became the target of the British, and their class composition was reduced severely in the infantry based on political loyalty, no other reason. So as you can see, the 8th Rajputs, an all Hindu Rajput unit, all Hindustani Hindu Rajput unit, non-Punjabi unit in 1914 performed well, But after the First World War, 50% Punjabi Muslims were inducted and Hindu Rajputs reduced from 100% to 50% in 1921 based on political loyalty considerations. The unit was renumbered 4 by 7 Rajput in 1921-22. So this is just one of the small sections from my book on the Indian Army class composition and how it was tempered and changed after the First World War.